All right, buddy. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Been Live podcast with your host, Ricardo Rice, and my co-host,
Simone Cherie.
All right, we are back in studio with all this going on. We just keep moving along, and we have a guest that's not a guest. It's more like a friend of the show, actually more like a sit-in correspondent, Mr. Jason B. Allen. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. It is great to be back with you amazing people.
We're happy to have you. All right, so for those that don't know you, give your story. Who are you?
Awesome. So Jason B. Allen, I'm 21 years in education. Saying that is very interesting.
I thought you were about to say you're 21. I was about to say, whoa.
I know.
Whoa.
I mean, I still look good, whichever age.
Okay, we'll go.
You know, 21 years in education, by trade, special education, literacy, very passionate about that. I currently work with the National Parents Union, which is a nonprofit organization that creates and implements positive policies. Now, I have to stress positive because I know we're going to get into a couple of things that have happened recently, but that's what we do to ensure that modern American families' voices are heard.
Okay.
There.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into some of these things that have happened.
So we have some recent headlines, and then we definitely want to talk a lot more about, want to talk about elections, want to talk about 2026 elections. I'm interested if you have thoughts on the superintendent's races and some other changes locally. But there's definitely some major headlines we should talk about. So when I walked in, we were talking about the Voting Rights Act and Thursday's Supreme Court decision, which was a follow-up decision to a prior one that I think sort of paved the way for this. We should start there. Let's just we can be quick about it, but it's important.
I don't know if it's a quick conversation, honestly.
Not quick.
I don't know if it's a quick conversation.
Historical context, yes, is
Back
critical.
down memory lane. I don't know if it's quick. I do want to start by saying Dr. Earl Davis recently passed away. He was a former Georgia chancellor of our university system and also the superintendent who, in my opinion, was a cleanup guy. He actually put us closer back to Dr. Krim's vision for children, not Black children, not brown children, not white children, but children in the city of Atlanta. And it's, just important for me to highlight his life as we start off this conversation with policy and what we're seeing with the Voters' Rights Act.
All right, who wants to give a backstory on this?
So I think the backstory was the original Supreme Court decision, but I'll just say the what of it. So the what of it is that the court struck down protections to majority minority districts. So that's essentially what's going to open the floor for potential redistricting. There were protections in the Voting Rights Act that ensured that if there were majority minority districts or voting areas, right, that these could not allow for discrimination, that you could not essentially draw lines in very creative ways, as history will show you, to sort of create minorities where they don't exist and prevent people of color, Black people in particular, from achieving representation and voting power, basically, getting to vote for their own candidates. There was also a protection that happened previously that said that the Supreme Court would no longer have authority to stop states from drawing these sorts of lines. So that was their baseline for this decision. It's basically the Supreme Court took away its own ability to say that there's no federal authority that can stop a state from drawing its lines. And this follow-up is saying that a majority minority district is no longer worthy of some sort of protection. So there's no longer in the Voting Rights Act that huge piece. And then the piece that blatantly said that there can be no racial discrimination in voting, which was crucial, right? Because we had things like poll taxes and quote unquote literacy tests, which were more so tests of like, how many windows are in the governor's mansion? Like those sorts of questions, right? Technically, there were things that anyone could fail, but they were intended to ensure that Black people would fail them, right? And to bar us from voting. So
that's good.
Both of those things were essentially struck in the past on Thursday, 2 days ago, opening the door for all manner of redistricting and no racial protections whatsoever for voting rights.
I think my concern is, and like I said, my theme this round has been reimagining. This is what happens when reimagining goes bad, because now it's like they keep saying this Jim Crow 2.0. This is what it starts to look like. It's like, okay, well, they're trying to paint this narrative. Well, racism doesn't exist anymore, so we don't need these protections. Mm-hmm. You guys are the living epitome of racism, especially at this moment. So now we'll see more gerrymandering, things that magnitudes. What I will say that brings me a little rubbing in of some kind of joy is Democrats are finally starting to stand up and say, well, if you want to go to war, we'll go to war. So it gives me a little hope that they're like, if you draw, we're going to draw. How it's going to end, I feel like this is World War III. Like, it's not an actual war. It looks like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's incredibly fair. I also think that, so Congress and the makeup of Congress could very much change right? Like the way that Congress looks. First of all, there's already overwhelming majority representation of white men in particular in Congress and certainly in the presidency. So we should talk about a couple of those numbers really quick. So white men make up 29% of the American population.
That's it?
That's quite large. Yes. White men over white women, black women, Hispanic, Latino men, Latino women, Asian men. 29% is already large. And right. And this is the group of people who says that they are dying and they're being discriminated against and they're being weeded out and they're losing their power. But they are every single president except for one that we've ever had. They're 90% of all CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. They're 90% of people who receive all venture capital funding. They're a majority of all university and college leadership. So like president, deans, senior faculty members, over a majority. And they also own a majority of assets. So asset management. So even for things like local city governments or county governments, where the money is being kept, a majority of asset managers are white men, even though there's other options. And they don't outperform people of color who also manage assets. So overwhelmingly, the swamp that everybody keeps talking about, which the acronym I think I may have just learned, I'm ashamed to say, the straight white American male preference, right? Is what swamp stands for. I'm just appreciating this. I don't know if that was its original acronym, but it's the one I'm adopting.
It works now.
Officially.
It works. I love that adoption. I would add to the data that you're sharing. It's also, when you mention assets, that's so important because when you think about government agencies, small businesses that we hear a lot about in the Constitution in each state, the majority of the contracts from hospitals, our public goods, our hospitals, our schools, our courts, the construction on the highways, these contracts go to, over 90% of them go to white men.
Yeah.
So that's also, I mean, a lot of people don't look at that data point because it's like, oh, it's just, those are subcontracts and it doesn't really have, it has everything to do with what you just said.
Even if the face of a government that's local may look different and even if it may look representative of the people, right? It's like, it's still these areas, these pockets of power and influence where there's still swamp, but there's still like straight white men in control in majority of cases. So this started with the Louisiana, the lawsuit that went up to the Supreme Court was originated in Louisiana because of the district that is a third Black, but that does not have representation in the state in Louisiana. And that's what originally caused the Supreme Court to strike it down and say, well, there's no protection for majority, minority, or that we will not be doing anything about whether or not there's protection for majority, minority districts. So basically completely rewrote, redefined Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act.
I think actually I'm going to ask you, I feel like you would respond very well to this. Why does representation matter? Why does this matter?
This is $1 million question. You know, let's go back to when President Obama was elected. This is backlash from when he was elected to be the president. Representation is important because all of the areas we have seen women's rights, maternal rights have been attacked. We have now seen education be attacked, where there are a lot of not just K through 12 educators, abolitionists, teachers, but also a lot of professors, a lot of collegiate staff members who have been very level-headed, progressive, wanting to see our country, move forward. A lot of the areas that we're seeing under attack have been areas, quite frankly, that have always been under attack by the establishment. Now, to double down on answering the question, why does representation matter? Let's look at Louisiana. Louisiana is number 4. Okay. Now, number 1 is Texas. Number 2, right behind Texas, is Georgia, that has the highest number of Black voters. So let's go to another area that's being attacked coming in at number 3 is Michigan. Number 4 is Louisiana. Well, why is Louisiana a game changer and such a major player when we look at the Voting Rights Act? When you look at these districts that are about to be changed, representation is important because it is backlash against the people. And let me also say this, it's not just the Democratic candidates, but or representatives. It's also Republicans who have said, we don't want data centers. We don't want you to close our regional hospital. We don't want you to close our public schools. So any of these representatives, Republicans, independent, or Democrats that have stood for progressive policies are under attack. And the people that have supported them and voted for them are under attack. Gerrymandering, redlining has not gone away. They were silent killers, which is how we have seen, or better yet to speak, we're in a literacy crisis. You see this every day in the classroom. We're in a housing crisis. Okay, we're in a health crisis because one of the things, the data points, the National Parents Union, we have seen is that in rural areas, for example, there were a lot of people who voted for Trump. Well, now over the last 6 to 9 months, they've been calling organizations like, we need help. A white father, I'll never forget, in Georgia, who lived literally within 30 minutes of the regional hospital when it was closed due to what? Funding being cut, right? He lost his wife and his child because he had to drive 2 hours to try to get maternal rights. See, people not under, and I'm sharing this because people were not putting the dots together. See, I didn't care about women's rights.
I'm talking about it enough.
Right?
But go ahead.
But just think about it. I don't care about women's rights because I'm listening to someone like Rick Jackson in Georgia running for governor that is basically making us think that these things are not important until it's your wife, until it's your child, until it's your, and why should it have to get to that for people to say, oh my God, this was important? And the staff members are like, well, you guys were around here having parties when these things passed and was like, oh yeah, this is great. And now, fast forward, it's impacting your wife. It's impacting your child. You can't access your regional hospital. You now have to drive 2.5 hours to get emergency care. So that's why representation is important.
Well, I'm just looking at TikTok, and now that the Snap stuff has kicked in, now I want to use my card and I can't use it. We told y'all this was going to happen, and we were hoping y'all wouldn't have to feel it to realize what is happening. Now they're feeling it, and they're realizing what's happening, and it's sad. And my fear is it enough to drive them to the polls?
Well, healthcare is what kills me the most, though, because that should be common. Everyone knows how expensive healthcare is. Everyone. And I don't care who you are. Like you're in a very 1% of a 1% to not have felt a hospital bill and like what that has done to your wallet or what that's done to your debt. And so, and especially for communities, rural communities, conservatives, that is the biggest question mark for me. But I want to go back to the point you were making about some of these states and Louisiana too, because states are basically already rushing to redistrict. Especially Southern. Louisiana, especially very aggressively done this. Florida was way ahead of it. Tennessee is also doing this. Now, Georgia will. It just so happens that our governor said that we're in the middle of early voting. It's already started, so it's too late. But Georgia will certainly be doing the same thing. And these are states where we control 3 to 10, U.S. Congressional districts, right? Like that's how many are potentially majority Black districts that are now going to be under threat. And you also made a great point when you said all these other ways of trying to undermine the Voting Rights Act, which absolutely, and certainly when it comes to education, literacy, civic education, but that took so much more effort and had to play out generationally. Whereas now this means I literally pick up a map, cut out this house, cut out that house, draw the lines this way, and make it so that there is no such thing as a Black majority anywhere. I mean, you could just be that blatant as they were before.
But that's what they're doing. And let's even talk about the literacy test. So we're here in Georgia. So if the literacy test is reenacted or is reinstated, there could be a question on there that says, how many peach trees are at the governor's mansion? Now, I'm trying not to cuss because we all know that there are no peach trees at the governor's mansion. But see, social studies teaches us that Georgia is known for peanuts, where South Carolina is known for peaches. But see, if we haven't valued social studies and we're not teaching that, you will never pass the literacy test, even if you Google it, even if you call someone, because people will not know that there are not trees or peach trees at the governor's mansion in Georgia, because all you hear is that we're the peach state. And so these are context, this is literacy, but it's something very simple like that people will not think that, oh, that's a test question for you to not only be able to vote, but even to get your voter registration card. So even if you already are eligible to vote, I'm just trying to wake this up for the people.
Yeah. No, I want examples. Like, I want examples.
Still will have to. So we still will have to take the test and we'll be able to say, okay, hey, this is what's on here. But then they'll also come up with another way to block people from being able to get connected.
Yeah.
Let's parallel this to education.
Yeah.
Because this is, you're the guy that's up there. I'm down here. So I'm seeing it, but you're knowing what's coming. Where do we stand with special education programs, interventions, things of that magnitude?
Yes.
Because
you
That's a
mentioned the
question
study as
that-
well that they're authorizing now.
So they are authorizing a study, right? But let's also be mindful of how is this study going to be conducted when we just watched over the last year our top scientific research consortiums, I'm trying to think, committees, like research teams, centers have all been defunded. So
Yeah. Sure.
now when we think about surveys being done, data being collected, well, who is doing this if you're not even certified? If you're not even touching all bases? Here's what I believe is going to happen with special education. It's going to revert back to what it originally was. So I talked to a staffer in DC about, how do we make sure that we are really reaching all children in education now that we're kind of like reverting things backwards? And he was not aware that his sister, who is an adult now, but also has a daughter who has a hearing aid, that impacts you.
Yep.
It was like, my parents did receive, when I was breaking down how this impacts everyone, this was a white, came from a affluent background. And he was like, I didn't realize that even though I came from an affluent background, my sister needed a hearing aid. She needed additional support. And we received support. And my parents received money even with our status. And I was like, right, because she had an IEP. She was supposed to be afforded that. Now think about children who are exceptional. And, Robert Kennedy and the Department of Health is saying, well, all these children have medical issues. They don't have educational needs that are a priority. So if you're stuttering, this is something by science that we need to have somebody medically licensed to work with you, to be with you. So now I'm with someone who is under a medical license, but they're not a trained educator. So are we really going to be educating children who have special needs? Are we going to be, quote unquote, treating them? Now, the last nugget that I will leave is this. Before the Department of Education, Georgia history is so important to this because it was President Carter who went around the country when he was campaigning for president, and he went into rural areas. He went into Black communities. He went into mixed wealth communities and looked at what is the education here in this community? How are children who learn differently being engaged? And so it's in the Carter Center. That is what led up to the development of the Department of Education, because what he saw as a candidate and then as president was that children who had they were being pushed to the back. They were being put in dark rooms. They were being put in the back of the school where they could not be seen by anyone. No access to sunlight, no access to water fountains, no access to the lunch period when, we're just going to bring you guys a bag lunch or lunch that is, in wrapping, and just here you are, because we're not considering you to be human or in the main population. So I'm very passionate about this because we have parent advocates across the country who have been back and forth to DC, people who are putting up their houses to advocate for their children who have special needs, because we all know that if this is, constitutionally bound, we have just basically reverted back to a 1920s model of education where Black children, brown children, children with special needs. I mean, they're talking about transgender children in restrooms, which we all know as being an educator, you have restrooms for everyone to be able to access. So even small things like that they will say, this is really causing, us not to be able to educate children properly. It becomes a huge dynamic to basically disenfranchise the people who have always been
and a growing portion of people, right? Because I saw research that there's a higher percentage of children who receive special support, special education every single year. I'm great. Let's go there. Let's look at the number of children let's go back to September 11th. That same year, God rest their souls, we lost Aaliyah and we lost Left Eye. We were distracted. I don't know what was happening, but we were distracted as not just Black people, because we were mourning, but also as a country with September 11th. Now, let's go back to February of that year in Black History Month. Why is this so important? Because President Bush said in a press conference that
well, by 2025, 2026, our public education system is going to be predominantly Black and brown children. Just in a whim, just out of the blue. Had nothing to do with what he was focusing on, or not even No Child Left Behind. Why is that so important? Because that is when everything started to change. It was more standardized testing. We had more Black children, quote unquote, that had behavioral issues, and they need to be tested early because, now they have what? They have a special need. So now we started seeing all of these Black children being pushed where? Into special education. Well, now we need more Black male educators because we need somebody to come in and control the behavior and be a presence so that the children will act right with these special needs. Now, I'm, again, an advocate for children who have special needs, and I know that it's present, but I also know in the state of Georgia, having worked in 3 different districts where I saw this, the majority of Black and brown children, and let me also add this, poor white children, their IEPs were incorrect. They were not correct. Black children, brown being indigenous Black, indigenous Native, or indigenous Latino, their IEPs were intentionally incorrect. And also poor whites. And so now these families are going to do what? Get medications. That's pharmaceutical. So we see where this is going.
What are some examples of incorrect? What are examples of how it could be incorrect? What is that?
For example, the majority of children are being diagnosed as being autistic.
Okay.
Well, you could have a form of autistic. I will also say this. I may be autistic. I'm dual exceptional. So I was gifted and talented, very bright in all of the academic areas and even other areas that were identified in the test at that time. But I also had a specific, or still have a specific, learning disability. What I believe is that most people are on the spectrum. Kind of like the LGBTQ plus IA. I believe everybody is on the spectrum.
Levels of things. Yeah.
It just depends on where you fall. The majority of children, I believe, are on the spectrum, but they're being labeled as having a specific learning disability. And a lot of times it may not even be that. A better example is this. A lot of children are being given the distinction of ADHD when they're dyslexic. Or they have dyscalculia. And so these are just something, a lot of kids have BIPs, which are behavior intervention plans. And yes, they're being, you need to just put them on this medication and they'll do better. We don't see improvements in the academics, but we see people saying, put these kids on medicine, put them on medicines. Now, I will also say this, being on the president's AI advisory before Trump came into office, that's the only way that I'm still on it. Let me also say that. What I have heard from big tech and ed tech is that we are struggling in America because the workforce coming in, they may be sharp, right? But they don't really have the creative skills. They don't have they don't have the soft skills, which Black women have been saying for the last 20 years. We have taken all of these elements out of school and we're losing the soft skills, right? Black women were saying that 10 years ago when they were saying that, you should not be telling kids to get their degrees in computer science. Black women were like, no. And I'm not saying others weren't, but Black women, we know Black women's role in this too. Black women were ringing the alarm and people were like, no, we need to silence them. Well, now let me tell you that I won't name the companies, but I'll keep saying big tech, ed tech has said that, we need people who had degrees in computer science. Well, why were we telling Black and brown children not to get these degrees 10 years ago? And now fast forward, they're saying that, there's a gap here. We only really have white males. I keep touching you because she made some great points here. Yeah. We're only seeing white men, but it was by design. And then you had counselors, you had school leaders, you had communities, you had faith-based organizations. I'm drawing the connection here because all of this is connected. It's not separate. It's not separated by race or class. It's separated by control. Janet told us best in the 80s. It's about control.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. And we talked about it when all these conversations happened around Medicaid, especially when Trump first came back into office. It was very clearly written this supports special education services. And all anybody could think about was welfare mother narratives. And how much money that we supposedly don't need to be spending. Never mind, we've already spent it in Iran. But that's what people were talking about. And what I was reading this morning was that we've never fully funded special education. It looks like the last study that came out was in the 90s. And at that time, we were already 20 years into this deadline of, we need to have an extra 40% per pupil. Like we need to invest at that level because that's how much it's going to cost based on that study. And we were at maybe 10% then. So like it's never been adequate. But at this point, it's like, to your point, even now that we're having another study, to have another conversation, which I do get tired of studies. I do get tired of that legislative answer to a study committee and research, and because there's so much there's so many people in the field already. There's so much information we could already find that we don't need a state sanctioned study for a lot of this. But even when they create it, it's like, where's the money going to come from? Like they didn't want to spend it before. How are we going to spend it now?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned recently is special education we think down. It's also up. Like that includes the kids that are gifted as well. I didn't know that until one of my peers, she's doing the specialized certification for the gifted kids. And she was like, you realize that's also included in special education. So it's not just down, it's also up. For sure. So it's just wild to me. Like being in it, it's just wild. And you get these kids in phonics and all this stuff, and you don't realize how important. I have kids now. The content is great. Her content is amazing, but every word is spelled wrong. It either has too many E's, too many L's, but they write. We were taught not to write how we speak. That's not how they were raised. So they write literally the way they speak. I had to get on the kid the other day because she wrote boom. We were doing such and then boom. Baby, you can't write the way you speak. Like you just can't write. And I'm sitting here as a second grade teacher. I'm like, phonics is not a space that I'm in. Like they're supposed to be able to do these things because next year there's a prompt you write. There's no more hand holding. None of that.
They're supposed to be able to do it, but let's also go back to conditioning. Let's go back just a little bit. Black women were telling us about phonics and these programs that we sit these children down in front of Cocoa Melon all day long, baby. You are going to say boom in a sentence when you have listened. And I'm not knocking Cocoa, make your money. However, parents are looking at convenience. So if I'm a stay-at-home mom or dad, because Georgia also ranks very high in having a lot of single dads that are raising kids. We don't talk about that either. Awesome. So working parents that are like, I need to work, I need to get this done, but I'm also having a homeschool because I know that the school is really not doing what they need. They're relying on programs that are recommended to them. And so to your point about the kids are very expressive, they're very creative, but they are writing the way that they speak. And then we also have to realize that they're hearing things consistently based off of content that's being created by other people who have come in and, basically said, oh, this is what I think Black people are. So you always, if you notice, the Black woman character always has some sass and an attitude. The Black male character is always overly stern or, okay, I'm coming in and I'm just like the right hand to be hard. Like they come in with that was a good character voice too, by the way. They come in to play these stereotypical roles so that children think like, oh, I'm supposed to respond to my mama like, girl, you know that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. However, we also know that the conditioning of stereotypes is what is being pushed down on our strategically at a young age because it's the dumbing down of our society.
Which leads us to iReady.
Oh, there.
What is that?
It leads us to iReady. It's a program that is designed to kind of move with the kids. So if they're taking this lesson and they're failing it, it shifts them down. If they're doing this assignment and they are excelling, it shifts them up. My worry was, and I know there was a lawsuit. My worry was, I get this data. So according to this data, my class is on par. Everything's great. In my everyday dealings with them, you're telling me they can do this stuff, and I'm telling you they can't. Because when I put it in front of them and they actually have to do it, they can't do it. So I think that's the lawsuit. The premise of the lawsuit is like, you're saying this, but in everyday execution, it can't be true. Now, it could be locked up. Like, they may be little sponges, but as far as executing, it's not there.
So the outcome of iReady, that's for teachers to have an idea about where people are? Like, is that where it goes?
Students and parents.
For students and parents.
Like, you get the results in real time. Like, they take it, like, we're getting ready for our iReady. It's called the diagnostic. They take it. As soon as they're done, it tells me where...
language.
Well, we thought it was great because when it's done, it puts things in domains. So it says the phonological awareness is here and all the other, it's like 7 domains. And like I said, it looks great. But when you sit down with these kids in everyday execution, I'm like, but you're telling me they can do this, but I'm not seeing it in their everyday work. So there's this kind of gap and there's nothing to refer to. So that's been it. Yeah, it only takes it in context. I know you know more about this. It only takes in context of people that are on the program. So it's not like putting them against everybody. It's just the people that are on the iReady platform.
So let's go back a little bit. I like to go back. I'm thinking about my great-great-grandparents who my great-great-grandmother lived to be 105. And on my dad's side of the family, on my mom's side of the family, my great-grandfather lived to be 107. And they did not finish primary grade school. Neither did my other great-grandparents who lived to be in their 80s and 90s. None of them, that generation, they did not finish third grade. Now, I was teaching when they were all alive. So, it wasn't a FaceTime. I had to call them on up. Okay. Now, let's go back just a little bit. I had to call them on up and then get the cord from the phone to plug it into the speaker that was already plugged into it wasn't even a Promethean board. It was kind of like anyway, not to go all the way back into how long I've been in education, but I was able to call them and they would do 15-minute talks with my students. They were able to read passages that my students in middle school could not read. And they had not finished third grade. They could do their times tables up to 15. Now, some of my gifted students, they could get up to 12. But I just want y'all to follow this. These were my great-great-grandparents who lived to be 105 and 7. And they could do these things, and they had not finished third grade. So I'm bringing this up because one of the reasons why iReady and other ed tech organizations hate the work that my organization does in policy is because we hip parents and families to the game. So if you have this tool and it's supposed to do this, your child is this age. What has been the standard and what is the current expectation? I have a question to ask you because you're seeing this in elementary school. When do children have the time to be children if by second grade I'm expected to write a full paragraph with 5 sentences, but the standards don't even say that I learn the kind of sentences until I get to 4th grade. So how am I in second grade? Just because this is what parents are asking. Why is this domain telling me in second grade my child should be doing X, Y, and Z, but then they learn this standard in 4th grade? So is that something that you're seeing with the programs that you guys are using? Well, not necessarily your school, but just programs that parents may be referred to use?
I think my disappointment was teaching some of the, I'm trying to word this right, teaching some of the curriculums, and the expectation was for them to be able to write a paragraph, but you never taught them mechanics. So the expectation is that they can write a paragraph, but baby, you don't know what a noun is. And you don't know what an adverb or an adjective is. And I took it upon myself, but my team was like, out the gate, I'm starting with this. Because it was nowhere in expectation. It's like, but you expect them to do this, but they don't have the tools to do it. That's why I call it parts of speech. I think after that, I was kind of like, okay. And then for me, because, I'm 46 and old school, my thought process was like, how does this make sense? How can they be expected to do this, but we're not giving them the mechanics to do it? And nobody said anything about this. Like, immediately for me, it was like, I'm not an educator by nature. Immediately it was like, how are you expected to do this?
That is a great point. And now I don't know how our people did it, because my grandmother's in the same way. They don't have that level of longevity. That would have been wonderful. But my grandmother's first language was Creole. She couldn't even speak English till she was 18. And she had to stop before third grade, around third grade, I remember, because it took a horse and buggy to get that far. But there was no other options after that. Like, she had to stop. So it's like, how did they become so literate and have better handwriting than me?
The science of
everyone
reading.
Younger than us.
It was teachers. Teachers play, even when we think about the role of the church and religion, regardless of how people believe, at the end of the day, Jesus Christ was a teacher. People do not hone on that. They don't hone into that. If you really study Christianity and Christ, Jesus Christ was he was a fisherman of men. How did I bring people in? I was teaching love. I was teaching I was teaching compassion. I was teaching, I was teaching those things. And so there's power in teaching. To answer your question, well, how did our ancestors do it? Those who knew spiritual, who knew holistic, who knew practices of the earth, who knew history, were able to sit down and, oh, you know how it is. Like, you get with your family, it's like, oh, let me teach you what I just learned. And that is how our people were able to sustain. It's also like it's recreating itself. When we think about now homeschools, micro schools, charter schools are even changing to where we are seeing, well, we were at one point, to go back to the original question of like representation. We were at one point seeing a larger number of Black and brown owned charter schools across the Southeast. I worked for one, Seven Pillars Career Academy. We were the only school in the state of Georgia that was non-suspension. And the legislators fought tooth and nail, state level and in the county that we were in, because of a school that is Black owned, Black led, that is non-suspension. It has a high number of children with special education. And you mean to tell me right now that 7 of my former students who were special education, they graduated a year early, they are in college, they are all in honors colleges. I'm saying that because there was an intent to make sure that schools like this were closed. The majority of these schools now, under this administration, they are closed.
Yeah.
The majority of them were in the Southeast region because they would have been considered freedom schools. They would have been considered the original grammar schools that Black people, indigenous people of this land created to be able to teach us holistic practices so we are sound spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and we also knew how to work with the system that we're living in, right? So we were able to bring that together. And even in Georgia with some of the candidates, we have to do our research on candidates, because we have a former NAACP state president supporting Jeff Duncan, who is a former Republican, and we have to look at the track record, because he has a not so good track record when it comes to maternal health in Georgia, impacting Black women, education impacting Black children, HBCUs and state property impacting the way and ability children are able to learn. So it all is connected.
I'm surprised about I'm still stuck on that endorsement over the other candidates. But can we talk more about convenience? And you mentioned ed tech, and I would like to hear from both of you more about AI integration in classrooms and reports about the support for one thing, for teachers as well, because I think we've talked some about cheating and like academic integrity and how this is happening with a lot of students and student work. But for teachers, there's also been reports about increased use for grading and things that can help teachers with efficiency. And I am curious about how you all feel about just AI integration or like tools and technology that's supposed to be helping teachers.
Let me say this. I want to acknowledge the last time you and Rashawn was here, because when y'all talked about kids being taught with pictures, that what they saw is what I became mindful of that and realized my kids do this a lot. So when I'm doing guided reading groups, I'm like, no, don't tell me what's in the picture. What did we read? Not what's in this picture. I didn't know that till y'all brought that up. I was like, oh my God, that is a thing. They really do look at the pictures. Even if that's not written on that page, that's what they see. So shout out to you guys for bringing that to mind, because I did not know.
And even thinking about that, going back to
that's the
ancestral practices, there were symbols that we were able to recognize, but that wasn't used to teach children how to read.
Right.
I was very shocked learning that teachers were not trained in the science of reading, because that I attribute my success as a teacher. Like, I come from a family of teachers, and everyone was like, you need to understand the science of reading, the science of numeracy, how to make sure that kids are connected, because it's all interconnected. So if I was never trained in that, and I don't understand that these disciplines are interconnected and they shape the other disciplines, then how am I really effectively teaching children? So I feel like at the end of the day, you brought up the lawsuit against iReady. We have been helping parents to understand the system, because and this is an I statement, I personally feel like more parents and families need to be suing these systems that are failing children. Because why are teachers not trained when it's our state's responsibility and our university system responsibility to train teachers? So if teachers were not trained in the science of reading and numeracy, and we're in a literacy crisis to me, that feels like
There was
a
a
system
lawsuit
failure, right?
in Michigan, a successful one, where students sued the public school institutions for the graduating like scores of illiterate students, and they won that lawsuit.
Well, I think that's a two-part problem, though. I mean, when you look at the field of education, people are not running to it. So it's like, what do you do with the people that are willing to do it? Like, because I think with myself, like, I have degrees in not education, and I'm not gonna lie, my desire to go back to school to do it.
But we're not talking about teachers, really. We're talking about the school board, and we're talking about who holds the power of the curriculum, right? And like who makes the decisions about phonics versus
who is really getting the money at the end of the day. Let's put this out here, because when I think about AI and ed tech, it's the same thing. I said this at the AI forum in Phoenix last year. We're going to see the same thing that we did with the book industry. When the book industry started saying that, oh, we can get contracts to make more money, it was infiltrated. And we know that those contracts went to a large percentage of the swamp, right? And now school districts are spending all of this money on like publishing licenses, but all of these things. And then we don't have enough books for children in school. So just think about that dynamic. We're paying all of this money for a product that we are not receiving, and then children can't start their courses on time. And so now they're behind, but see, the children get penalized,
right,
or the parents. So think about where the money is going. The same thing, connection to AI and all of these tools. AI and iReady is such a good case to look at, because parents are buying into these tools thinking that, oh, my child is going to read better. They're going to perform better. They're going to be more creative, when you really find out that it's really more or less of that. And it's more like I'm being sold this 8-course meal, like this fabulous experience, and I keep getting stuck with different versions of the appetizer. So you're stuck in these different versions of the appetizer until the child says, I've already eaten this before. I already know this. I already had some. Do you see how I'm connecting that? So when parents are like, well, they know this, and we keep getting this report back that they're not moving. That's what happened with iReady. The parents realize that we're getting the same 4 portions of this appetizer when we're being sold that we're getting this entree or we're getting this. And we're tired of how this tastes, because it's not even starting to mix well, and our children are they're not keeping it.
Right.
That's what happened with iReady. And that's the connection between, AI and the tools.
And it sounds like that lawsuit is also mostly about the data privacy.
Oh, yeah.
And not really like the bigger concern of like, is this good? Is this bad? Is it like useful screen time? All those sorts of things.
So the lawsuit in New York, which was one of the very first ones, we had parents from a couple of our partner organizations who were a part of that. And data privacy is a huge thing. The Kids Online Safety Act is a federal piece of legislation that we've been pushing and moving into different states that also helps to capture this. One of the things that Rayshawn has been advocating for, he mentioned this the last time he was here, Senator Kemp, but also looking at data privacy, and school boards play a role in this. Now, the position school boards are in, they're trying to fill deficits, because again, we're losing money federally. If we are in Title I schools, Title I receives money federally. So we are saying, eliminating the Department of Education, people still haven't connected that if we have a large number of Title I schools across the country that they rely on these supplemental funds, they rely on them because their general budgets have a deficit or they're not able to meet those, those needs. If we eliminate that, how are we funding education? So now school board members are in very peculiar situations, because now they have to look at, tech companies that can say, we can furnish your human resource department if you do this product. Or so that's the game that's being played now with, how do we really keep people employed? Let's just drill down here. Keeping people employed, that's economics. We got to keep the base happy, because if people are losing their jobs and kids don't have anywhere to go, there is a problem. But there still is a larger problem with, why are the majority of our elementary schools across this country having deficit budgets that are in the red, and we're relying on ed tech to bail us out while we're also simultaneously dismantling the Department of Education?
Wasn't that in Project 2025?
It is. It's. Let me tell you. Your adversary will spell out everything in front of your face. And I go back to, I keep drilling down on highlighting Black women, because one of the things that I've seen in Capitol Hill and just being in the policy space is that there have been Black women who have been, whether they were Bahamian, Jamaican, Native, from the hood, from Buckhead, it didn't matter. It's always been Black women on the front lines ringing the alarm about what's happening with our children and happening with our communities. And we really got to take a step back and listen. Black women have been ringing the alarm about ICE. Last year in 5 cities, Black women were organizing people around, hey, police brutality is going to repeat itself in ICE. No one listened to these women. Now in January of this year, everyone is like, we need to organize. ISIS, this is happening, this is happening. And Black women were like, so all last year when they were flooding Black community, this was happening last year. But people in Atlanta were like, oh, we're seeing ICE in these. Well, what about the organizers last year that were telling y'all that they were doing this and they were using the police, and no one listened to us because it was showing up in Black communities and it was oppression against Black people when those tactics are used against all of us.
Okay, what? As usual, we're running real thin. Solutions. Because I don't have this conversation about all this and we don't give people some, because it's a very heavy conversation. What are some things we could be doing or we should be doing at this moment? Outside of voting, we know that.
Can I get your opinion on a reversal? Speaking of the solution, so like the law that just passed to cap property taxes, which helped to fund public schools here, which are funded 71% through those taxes. And now we've capped it because it's an election year and because Republicans wanted to do it, but it's going to immediately impact funding for schools. That's something that that can be, reversed just as quick as it was enacted. But do you have any thoughts about that, about just funding for schools? Really
quickly, I'm going to do my hands like this so I can make sure I don't go over time. Florida started this. You made a good point about Florida. It is the blueprint, one, because Trump is there, and there's already been payouts to people. We are seeing public education become privatized right in front of our eyes. And I say this out loud because the charter school networks are also going to be impacted because charter schools are a public good.
Right.
However, there are no public charters if there are no locally operated public schools. And so in Florida now it's like, oh, we need this school. We need this version of the school. Well, who is funding the school? Well, not AI corporations, people who have an interest in community data centers or people who own data centers. And I know we love Amazon and all of these things. It's all connected at the end of the day. And a lot of times people are going to the right and saying, oh, you're helping me, when they actually are creating the very problem that you're living through. So for solutions, people have to start having conversations with their families. What does family look like? It's different now. So family could be cousins that are in another state. It could be your next door neighbor who you live by for 17 years, and that's your family. People need to be in the know of what's happening. The second thing is, Aaliyah said we got to go back and forth. We got to take old school practices and new school practices. So why do you not know how to write in cursive? Why do you not know how to change the tire of your bike or your scooter? Because a lot of kids are doing the scooters now. Making sure that we can do things that, yes, AI can come in and assist, but it shouldn't be coming in to replace. So we need to be able to build
social
those skills. Social skills.
Being
able to, that was going to be number 3, is spending time with each other in real life and not just relying on technology. Now, if I'm in China and, you're in Utah, we need to use technology, right? Because we're not in close proximity, but that should not take away our human connection, which is why these teen takeovers are happening all over the country, because these teens are seeing, one, something digitally that's being fed to them. And 2, when they do get together, they don't really know how to interact because they haven't really interacted with humans. So we have to go back to some really basic things. And last but not least, I would say we have to put our money where our mouths are. If my great-great-grandparents could help build grammar schools, HBCUs, churches with saving dimes, nickels, and pennies, and we have a working class of Black Americans. We have a Black elite, a Black echelon,
These words.
the upper echelon. We have all of these people that could be funding, these things. I always challenge my family members and community members that are in Greek organizations, service organizations. Does your national organization own a hospital? Do we have a network of schools where, okay, they're shutting down public education? The HBCU should already have a pipeline, K through 12 of schools where we can say, hey, these are places that are educating Black children that can be funneled into here. We should already own our own warehouses in areas where we can employ people. But if Nike, if Air Jordan, if Applebee's, if Amazon, if Uber has all of our money, then what do we have? So those are my solutions.
Okay, well, so we got 7 minutes. Topic toss up. What can we get through in about 5 minutes that we should touch on?
So many things. And I sent you a quick list.
I know. Actually, I really want to get into, because I actually heard that conversation about the need for higher education, and I was zoned in, because I was like, this is the conversation we should be having as well about higher education institutions. Not so much their usefulness, but is that usefulness still the same? You have kids that are racking up $70,000, $80,000 worth of debt and getting into a job market that is gridlocked and they can't do anything. But here comes student loan coming knocking 2 months after you graduate. Should it really have that much weight as it used to? Ivy League schools, have we given them too much power?
Right.
To feel like they're necessary for our kids. I mean, we know that the upper echelon, it works for them because they're legacy and they're probably not paying as much as our kids are. But is it guaranteeing them anything? Because if that's the marker that I have this degree and it's supposed to give me so much headway in the job market now where our kids are getting out there, you have $8,000 worth of debt and can't find a job.
Well, it does that though.
So this is because of Thursday, the Department of Education, whatever's left of it, capped graduate student loans and said that they have to be capped at a certain amount. And they're saying that will force universities to charge less for tuition because students won't be able to just take out loans over a certain amount.
Well, again, it's all a system and who is making money and how. People who have access to go to Ivy League and elite schools, they're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Now, the children it's almost kind of like we're fighting to be in places where the reality is, should we even really be there? I went to a PWI, and what people don't realize is you do have a very similar to HBCU experience because you are not accepted by white colleagues unless they just are that type of person. You do have that, I say this, you do have the Jimmy Carter Caucasian where you do meet them where they're into humanity. They do really love all people.
Yeah, they really have others who are like,
I know my privilege, I know my power, and I know where to put you in your place. You run into more of them than the Jimmy Carters. I'm just being honest. And I'm saying this because we are sending Black children into spaces where we want them to be in the Ivy League and the upper echelon universities, but are these safe spaces for them? And a lot of times, it's not. Also, we're putting kids in this place and you still need a level of affluence and money to sustain you in different rooms. And I think that a lot of people are going to these universities and are seeing that I'm not getting into the job market that I thought this school was going to put me in. I'm not getting into the places where I thought this school would afford me because they haven't fully assimilated. People who assimilate, they may make it, but we also know the social emotional impacts that places on people.
I just think about me having almost 4 degrees and like $200,000 worth of debt, and I'm not even sitting in that space. So that conversation is very near and dear to me because I'm like, these are very good points to have. Final thoughts.
I was about to say trade schools are also, there's a war right now against trade schools because this generation of young people have said, we believe in a different world. We love all of that. But we also know that if it's not for us, by us, I need to have a trade or a skill so I can survive. And there are more children, more young people who are going to get trades, but trade schools are now also under attack. So they don't want them to be liberal. They don't really want them to be providing the skill set needed to, especially those of us who are not coming from affluent families, to thrive. So again, it's all about control. Who's controlling the masses, who's controlling the money, and who's controlling the mindset.
Oh, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes by elections. You got really excited when we said we were going to talk about elections, but we only got like 2 minutes. So
elections are important. People need to know who they're voting for. They need to get out to vote. If voting wasn't important, again, in 2026, there's a certain demographic of people who have been trying to take the rights of Black and brown people, their ability to vote, away for years. The swamp, consistently. Baby, please. If voting was not important, why are these people, we have ancestors that have died over this. They have too. If it was not important, why are we still having this conversation? So if you have the ability to get out and vote, even if you have a felony, look up your rights. There are people being released that can vote, but they're being conditioned by institutions, including the church, that are telling them, I had to throw that in there, that are telling them that you did this wrong, you can't vote. You very well can vote. We need people to get out and vote, but we also need them to be educated voters.
Do you have any candidates that are on your brain? Because we did that with the last couple of guests.
Let me tell you, for the governor's race, I know if you are a Republican, you should not be supporting Rick Jackson unless you want to put us back into slavery. I think Keisha Lance Bottoms does have support across the state. I think she's being demonized intentionally. That's a whole nother conversation. We can get into that in another podcast. But I will say that Ulu Brown has made some really great points. And having been across the state, people who are like, you know what? He is the and maybe because he's a pastor, but he really was intentionally listening. And he made such a good point. We keep repeating. We do a rinse and repeat cycle with politics. Why do we keep electing people who have already been in office and already failed us? And I think about people who have changed parties, who have changed positions, and we keep doing this statewide, locally, putting people in office, and we're still in debt. Our highways are not done. Our schools are closing. Our hospitals are closing. Democrat or Republican, we keep putting these people in office, and the people keep losing more.
Final thoughts?
Same thing. Pay attention. If you just because you have a felony doesn't mean you can't vote. If you've served or completed your sentence, you absolutely can vote in the state of Georgia. So look up on your My Voter page whether or not you can vote.
Shout out to our guest, Jason, because I'm not gonna lie, when I came in the studio, I was like, I'm not here for it. I just don't have it to give. But when he shows up, yes. I have it to give. So definitely shout out to you. And we'll see you same time, same place on Leadership in Live podcast with the host Ricardo D. Rice and my co-host
Simone Cherie.